Hi guys. Today I want to talk about a slightly controversial topic. I want to talk about the polarization that is currently ongoing in our society between men and women. I know it sounds strange if you think about it, because we're all kind of part of the same animal type, and even across animals there are males and females. But it seems, maybe partially due to the internet, that there's a lot of polarization ongoing. And the polarization in itself has been kind of a trend that's been happening more and more, which might be a topic that I want to dive into in a future video. But for today, I want to keep it around the topic of masculinity and femininity. We probably all know people in our circles, friends or family, who are perhaps feminists or perhaps really traditional value people. And what I find, at least from my own experience, is that none of these directions fully seem to give a fulfilled answer to the question. And what I try to do, and what I want to talk about today, is that there is a different way to look at it that doesn't have to polarize the whole discussion, but can give a kind of global understanding of what is ongoing. And luckily, not only based on my own intuition and feeling, but based on what other experts say, specifically Carl Jung, what his ideas are on the masculine and feminine, and that these are, of course, also not linked to males or females per se. So this topic I really want to dive into today, and hopefully by explaining it I can myself get a better understanding of the situation, but I also want to be able to express that in a way that is easy for you guys to digest, hopefully triggering some discussions, and also something that we can build on in future videos and come back to. So today's video is really about Carl Jung's view of the masculine and feminine, and how this knowledge can be used to analyze current day society, and a way in which we can see the world without pointing fingers at each other, but actually trying to reflect on ourselves and see what we need to do as society, but also what we can do as an individual in order to improve the situation for the future. So what is actually masculinity and femininity? I will try to stick to at least the Jungian definition, which I think is also coherent with how it is commonly used. So we have two kind of energies that exist. You can see it as that. And those energies or concepts or framework are opposite but complementary to each other. So if you look at the masculine characteristics, they are action and initiative, logic and rationality, goal-oriented behavior, assertiveness and competitiveness, focus on external world and achievements, and associated with consciousness and the ego. And the feminine characteristics are receptivity and intuition, emotion and empathy, process-oriented approach, nurturing and cooperation, focus on inner world and relationships, and associated with the unconscious and the soul. So as you can see, these two are opposite but complementary energies or essences of what Jung describes as a integrated self. And therefore also his main statement is that every single human being needs to integrate both of these parts. And what you commonly find in people, because of society, because of biology, because of how the world functions, usually males tend to have a proclivity towards the masculine characteristics from when they are born to how they are raised. And for women, it's mostly the case that they have a proclivity towards the feminine characteristics. But Jung says that in order to become a full, developed, grown-up individual, you need to actually also integrate the parts of the opposite characteristic. So if you have a proclivity towards the masculine, you also need to come to peace with your feminine characteristics in order to really become who you truly can be. And this is a very nice point of view, because this really opens the door to all kinds of different people who have different experiences. Maybe someone who is by temperament a bit more feminine, although he is a born male. And that does not exclude him or her from this whole discussion. There's actually a continuum of characteristics that all fall within this framework, and it's very inclusive in that sense. Well, that doesn't take away that, of course, you have biological well, you have a biological, physical body with certain biological needs that are specific to born males and females, which are different. Our bodies function slightly different. And there are, of course, some differences, which is also why you have this original proclivity to, for instance, be more inclined towards the masculine or the feminine. But again, if you want to become full integrated human, you need to kind of transcend your mere biological, physical nature, and you want to take a step up, grow up, and be able to flow within these states as serves you the best. Jung says about this topic, quote, "What about masculinity? Do you know how much femininity man lacks for completeness? Do you know how much masculinity woman lacks for completeness? You seek the femininity in woman and the masculinity in men, and thus there are always only men and women. But where are people? You, men, should not seek the feminine in woman, but seek and recognize it in yourself as you possess it from the beginning." Beyond that, he also says, "Humankind is masculine and feminine, not just man or woman. You can hardly say of your soul what sex it is. But if you pay close attention, you will see that the most masculine man has a feminine soul, and the most feminine woman has a masculine soul. The most manly you are, the more remote from you is what woman really is, since the feminine in yourself is alien and contemptuous." And I think this is really a very important point that Jung brings up, namely that the thing that is most remote from your conscious expression of your soul is the thing that you most need to integrate. And it's also the thing that you probably have the most issues with in your day-to-day life. Now, how does this connect to the world that we currently live in? There's a lot to say about current society and how it got this way, and maybe that's a topic for a different video altogether. But in general, we can say that the society that we live in basically focuses so much on achievements, on the external world, on corporate jobs, making money, becoming rich, buying a house, buying a second house, how you present yourself online, social media, a lot that has to do with the external world and purchasing and achieving and projecting yourself outward, which is a very, very masculine focused environment. Now, I'm very actively trying not to mention anything like patriarchy or anything like that, because this video is not about the system that we live in. I would also not necessarily say that I subscribe to the idea of a patriarchy in that sense, but I just want to say that we live in a very masculine-oriented society, and the feminine, the like positive feminine, is very scarce and absent. And what you find is that women are more and more being pulled out of their femininity because there seems no value for being truly feminine in this world anymore. It just seems that everyone needs to get into this treadmill of corporate life and generate as much value, like be as efficient as possible, create as much money, as much material goods, as much exposure, marketing value as is humanly possible. And if you go back to the list that I mentioned before, so the whole expression of the masculine characteristics, goal-oriented behavior, competitiveness, focus on achievements, and things associated with the ego, this is the world that we live in. And the things that are really undervalued in the current moment is cooperation, focusing on the inner world and relationships, the unconscious and the soul. These are things that have practically no value in current day society, and we are suffering the consequences of this. And I'm finding it very tricky and hard to fully articulate my thoughts here, because it's a very sensitive topic, of course. But what has seemed to have happened is that previously, so after Industrial Revolution, half the population, which are men, would be forced into this never-ending treadmill of capitalism. Everyone seems to be in this never-ending treadmill right now, where the only real goal in life is to have a career and work and prove yourself either in the academic or corporate regime, make as much money as you can, go to the most luxury places in the world, and that is the goal of people's lives right now. So what is really interesting to see is that this, at one point, very clear feminist movement is now oftentimes demonizing the masculinity and patriarchy in our society, but at the same time also promoting the sense of masculinity, the masculine traits to be adopted by women and everyone in a general sense. And very similarly, you see in men also a very clear absence of true femininity, which they try to cling on to with traditional norms and values. And this whole absence of real balance in that just generates this very clear us versus them narrative, where both seem not to really get what they really need. And I think the reason is because no one really knows how to define what they really need. And at this point, it might be very useful to present. So at this point, it might be very useful to look at two specific cases. One of a current day situated male figure and one of the current day situated female figure, to kind of explain and sketch an image of the situation in which we are at the moment. So case number one, a man who never learned what true healthy femininity is. They will try to be hyper masculine on the surface because that's the only game they know how to play. That's the only game in which they will be recognized, in which they will be valued, and in which they can express themselves, in which they can let go of certain types of aggression, which they haven't learned how to integrate. They will deeply feel like something is missing because their soul misses the connection with the feminine, although they don't really know what that is. So they have this internal yearning. They will look for images of the quote-unquote perfect feminine, but they will never find it, and they will never be satisfied with what they find. And they will likely easily fall for fractions of the so-called perfect feminine. Because they are hyper masculine, they also need hyper feminine counterparts to balance them. So they will try to find traditional women because this is their view of what the femininity is that they're looking for, mainly to take care of them, to not compete with them, so to show the least possible number of masculine traits. This is because they have failed to integrate it, both the masculine and the feminine, and therefore they couldn't grow up. So they are still in a kind of infantile state where they are in need of the adult feminine, which is a mother figure. So they're looking for someone who can take care of them and which they can depend on, which they can rely on. So they are basically still a mother's child, but in tyrant's clothes. The extreme shadow version of this is men who cannot control their urges, leash out in aggression. Domestic violence is an example, sexual violations, and demonizing women in their mind as they do not quench their thirst for the true feminine. Now, case two, the case for the female situation, women who have never learned what true femininity is and grow up in our current society will not have integrated their core part inside their own soul. So they will feel separated and ungrounded basically from the start. They will also feel like there's something missing. They don't know of the power of true femininity, and the only concept of power that they know is the masculine form of power, which is physical, aggressive, assertive, dominant. And therefore they try to compete and measure themselves with other men in the masculine arena. As I said before, the capitalist corporate environment is very masculine. So they're very linear, input-output based. So this is the arena where they try to measure themselves and show their value. This means that women take on the role and compete in the masculine realm. However, they also have very conflicted feelings on the inside, because they also never got to reconcile their femininity with the masculinity. They also never got to grow up. Therefore, they still desire a caring father figure, someone who provides and protects them and who cares for them. They can't consolidate their upbringing and society they live in with the biological reality, and therefore completely miss out on the beauty of having children and building a family. The extreme shadow, therefore, is also a woman who projects onto everything the helplessness of a child, and the demonization of men. Every man is to blame for the pain and suffering in the world. Every victim, everything that is crying for help, is automatically correct and needs to be helped. And this is, of course, a projection of the biological behavior of a caregiver responding to the cry of an infant. So I hope I managed to express the two cases in a proper and fair way. I hope I didn't offend any of the two sides, because for me it's really nonsensical to put either men, women, masculine or feminine above the other. I feel like there's a very deep need in us to reconcile all these energies, and what we are truly missing is strong images and role models of what real femininity looks like. And if you take this from this macrocosm from society into a more of a microcosm, or at least more localized towards what happens in an interpersonal relationship between two people, what you can typically find is that you have two people with a more emphasized masculine energy and an underemphasized or repressed feminine energy. If two people get together, they need to have a balance within these energies. That means that one of the two needs to drastically tune down their masculinity in order to match the ratio of masculine to feminine within themselves compared to the other person. And the only reason for that is because we don't have the knowledge and the intuition of femininity. So the other person cannot increase their femininity, therefore he or she needs to decrease their own masculinity in order to match this balance, in order to get this attraction between the two. If this doesn't happen, if none of the two wants to suppress part of themselves, these people can simply not find a connection. This can also be seen in the fact that less and less people tend to have really long-term relationships. So according to this theory, it's just way harder for people to find each other attractive because their energies just don't match. But for the people that do find each other attractive and get together in a long-term relationship, you typically find that on top of the repressed femininity, one of the two also needs to repress part of their masculinity in order to match the ratio of the other person. So if you are in a relationship and you want more femininity from the other side, actually what you need to do is you need to develop your own femininity within yourself, so you have another bucket to balance everything with. So if you can increase your femininity, that means you can also have a more natural expression of your masculinity, and that again will trigger the other person to also have the space, the need, the desire to develop their femininity. So if you want to start balancing something out, regardless of the outcome you desire, for both male and female who have an underdeveloped femininity, it's very important to start developing our feminine characteristics. And I also believe that if we can do that, and if we can create better role models for strong feminine characteristics, we can have a huge impact on society. And I hope that this also gives a bit of a better framework to look at the whole male-female situation, if you don't have to look at it anymore from a masculine in males and feminine in females, but you actually realize that both of these are always necessarily present in both, and we are just stuck in this kind of infantile state, which is also something that I will probably address in my next video. If you like this video, please leave a like, and if you have any comments, questions, or you want to yell at me, please let me know in the comments below. And above all, don't forget to have a nice day.